The Branding Your Business podcast is for small business owners looking to build a customer favorite brand and a value-driven business. From solo shows covering marketing tactics to experts sharing their brand stories, each episode delivers actionable insights for entrepreneurs who want to impact the world. We're sharing how strategic moves and authentic connections can build a profitable business minus the burnout. Tune into the Branding Your Business podcast with me, Praise Santos McKenna of Come Plum, to design a brand your audience adores while building a life you love. Hey there, welcome back to the Branding Your Business podcast. I'm your host, Praise Santos McKenna, the founder of the branding studio Come Plum in San Francisco. And we have this kind of like East Coast to West Coast situation going because we have my friend Daniel, who's from also my hometown in Orlando, Florida, but we both moved out to the West Coast. So he is in Seattle. And I love the connections. We have a lot of mutual friends and they knew that we were both creative. So they made sure we became friends. And we've done just like some fun stuff together over the years. And then Daniel launched his podcast and we're like, oh my goodness, all the intersections of all the things. So let me brag about my friend real quick. Daniel Mogg is a filmmaker, director, and storyteller based in Seattle, Washington. As the founder of Mogg Media, he has crafted compelling visual narratives for top athletes, brands, and organizations. His work spans sports documentaries, commercials, and branded content, collaborating with NFL players, pro sports brands, and celebrities. Daniel also hosts the Frame by Frame podcast that dives into the creative process with filmmakers and industry insiders. Whether behind the camera or the mic, he is dedicated to capturing stories that inspire and resonate. And also, can I just, again, brag, he's also a 4-time Emmy Award winner. And so this is so fun to have him on the show because we're going to dive into the creative process. We're going to dive into what it is to run your own business that's like aligned with your values. So I'm so glad to have Daniel on the podcast today. Daniel, you come from a big background of a lot of creative energy and a lot of creative experiences, but let's like dig into the present. Like, how are you showing up today? Anything that's inspiring you in the last week? How you doing?
Hey, Praise. Well, fun. It's an amazing intro. Thank you. But you forgot I'm Filipino as well. We got the Filipino connection. Creatively, I would say, so my wife got me Rick Rubin's book on creativity. I'm blanking on the title. I just know it's about creativity.
Is it the War of Art? Is that
No,
one?
hold on. Now I have to look this up because it's bothering me. The Creative Act, A Way of Being. And it's one of those books that it's kind of like, you don't have to read it front to back. You can kind of just like open it and find some sort of like creative inspiration around it. And the section I've been on is like this analogy of having your antennas out and available to receive. I think I've been, I guess, convicted on a sense of like, oftentimes either when I'm out doing stuff, I honestly have my AirPods in listening to something because I do enjoy that, but I've been trying to like take that antenna analogy and put those receptors out to the world because, you know, I might hear a conversation that could spark a creative idea, some maybe like good dialogue for a film. So that's kind of what I've been into the last couple of weeks.
Ooh, antennas up. That's really good. Yeah, I have been challenged recently. Like, when do you just go on walks for the sake of a walk? Stop like going to a destination or stop just like, oh, I'm getting exercise. Oh, I'm going to listen to the podcast or call my mom or something while I'm on this walk. It's like, no. Just like go out, be, and receive and see what's out there. I think that almost takes a lot of discipline more than just like, I'm doing a workout. So I love to hear that you're trying to be intentional about getting that creative spark. I also love the idea that you're like, maybe I just casually eavesdrop on people and it becomes some dialogue of my next short film. Is that how you've written some of your short films? Is that how you've written some scripts?
Not yet, but that's why I'm working on the practice. I would say for me, and you know, I can't wait for you to experience this joy and new perspective in the coming months as you become a parent. But for me, like becoming a parent really kind of has changed the way that I view the world, and not like in a complete, I guess maybe in some ways a complete different way, but almost think about it, you know, with your photography background, it's almost like I've shot at a 35 millimeter my whole life, and now I'm like onto a 50 or 85 millimeter. Like things just look a little bit different. And so my first short film I wrote this last fall called The Last Flight really stemmed from this idea that my son started noticing airplanes in the sky and would just point them out and say airplane. And so I got to thinking about like when he gets older, like how do I explain the concepts of airplanes to him? And it got me thinking like, well, that's interesting. Like airplanes are a pretty newer thing. Like there was a time when airplanes didn't exist and the only travel you could do was like by wagon, on the Oregon Trail. And that kind of got me thinking of like, I wonder what it would look like in a modern world to have all forms of transportation except for planes. Like the world would look a lot different. And so that was kind of the idea that sparked the last flight. And then we had a big Filipino wedding this summer, and that cyber strike happened that like grounded all the planes and like messed up all the travel. Because in my mind, I was like, it would be cool to see that type of world without air travel. I was like, I don't even know what would have to happen for that to even be plausible. And then that event happened, and that's kind of how I arrived to my short film. So it's all this like different inspiration of mix between like what's happening in my world, maybe real life events that are taking place. That's kind of all where I draw my inspiration. But I'm finding as I'm getting now into my mid 30s, like life experience does play a lot into kind of the stories that I want to tell.
That's so good. I love hearing this. I feel like I'm on IMDb right now of just like, okay, what inspired the last flight? How did this come together? I'm a nerd of feeling out the origin story. So this is so, so good to hear. Also, I feel like you're almost telling me like me having a child, is this a business write-off? Are they like part inspiration? I might have to
Yes.
ask some of my like accounting guests in the future that it might be a stretch, but I feel like this is a very good argument. Okay, so let's roll it back a little bit. So we hear about some of these creative endeavors with Mog Media, some of these short films, but you kind of started off your career as a creative for hire, right? Like as a creative in these bigger businesses, these bigger organizations. Tell us a little bit about that journey and your transition into working for yourself. What has that been like? What have the similarities been like? What have the shocks been like? I know that a lot of our listeners are also creatives who have either come from the corporate world and want to do their own thing. And some people are doing the reverse. They have worked for themselves and kind of want to go back to an organizational structure. So I think your story will really matter to them.
Yeah, of course. I'd love to speak to all of that. A quick version of my story is I started a nonprofit in Tampa with Family First, All Pro Dad. Was fortunate to get to know, one of the co-founders, Tony Dungy, through that Super Bowl winning coach and analyst at NBC. We built a relationship, and I just got to the point, thankfully, where I could ask him like, hey, like I love what we're doing, but I kind of have bigger goals and aspirations for myself. Like, can you help me get in at NBC? He was super kind enough to make that happen. And then my like real big break was working and living on the Sunday Night Football bus for a season. I know we came out to San Francisco one time. We got to hang out and shoot some stuff around town, which was super fun. And then from that, I kind of like graduated into the Sunday Night Football broadcast team as a social media content creator. That was really when on-site content creation at sporting events was like really starting to take off between, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook Live, all those good things. And then through that, I actually met Russell Wilson on set at the Carrie Underwood Sunday Night Football Open shoot, which was really cool because I was a huge Seahawks fan. My family's from Seattle originally, so I grew up a Seahawks fan. So we just kind of like got to know each other. And, over a season, the Seahawks were on Sunday Night Football a lot. So we would just run into each other. And in 2017, he asked me to come help him run his production and branding company as he was getting, a lot of brand deals, was working on building out his social media. And so I was with him from 2017 to 2022. And I launched Mog Media in 2022 and have been on my own since. So that's kind of the high level view of what I've been up to in, the 10 or so years of my career.
That's so good. And it sounds like there were so many like right connections, but also that you had the guts to ask for the next step too. And you also had the clarity of where you wanted to go, which is huge because I know that a lot of folks listening to the podcast, they're listening because they want to build. They're listening because they do have some aspirations, but they're still like, how do I get there? And hearing stories like yours where you're like, well, you get that clarity and then you have the courage to make the ask, you make the next right step, which often leads to the next right step and the next right step too. So I do think it's like a beautiful story how those have all melded together. What has it been like the energy shift of, okay, now I'm like, actually the visionary behind Mog Media, and I am the last say in it versus like I was working for Russell Wilson, I was working for the NFL. How has that energy shifted? Have you liked it? Have you seen more leadership parts of yourself coming out? What has that shift been like for you, Daniel?
To be transparent, it's been like probably most entrepreneurs, super high and very low lows. And that seems to be, kind of a common theme of everyone I've talked to who's in similar situation. I do think kind of the way filmmaking, entertainment, advertising, the industry's been the last couple years has been a little tumultuous, and that's like played into it. But I would say I try to be like, very practical in either like advice I give and even on my own podcast, because I try to think about maybe that version of myself like 10 years ago and like reach back to them and what I would tell myself. So, what I would say to folks who are kind of like either looking to make the jump or trying to just find where they want to go, I do think there is a responsibility of like having a plan in place and taking the jump at the same time. The jump will always be scary, but having some sort of plan in place will really make that direction the right way. An example, so I technically had my production company open for a while because I did kind of start at NBC technically on a freelance side. And I just like, I kept it open because I never knew what was going to happen. And like when Russell got traded and I was deciding if I wanted to move and go to Denver, it did make it a lot easier to make the decision knowing that my business was already kind of set up and I could just roll right into doing it versus going through all the steps and figuring out how to launch a business, if that makes sense.
Totally. Yeah. Like you're still being wise about it. I do think artists or creative types, there was a time where they would have this reputation or stereotype of like, oh, we just go with the wind, we're just like flowing. And you're like, okay, you're making us sound like we're flighty people when in fact you can have your antennas up and walking around where you're like, okay, I will go where the inspiration takes you. And I can be really grounded and practical about my next steps in my career and the direction I'm going and the path where I want to be and the people I have to connect to get there too. And it sounds like that's what you were doing. Just like, okay, I do want this and I need to keep this thing open on the side for a just in case, almost as a backup. And it seemed to prove itself right. Like, oh, thank God I had Mog Media already here, just because with the different directions of different bosses that you work with, it seemed like the right choice. Which when you go back to Mog Media, you're doing such an array of things. You all have to see some of his work for these big brands like Alaska Airlines. Like you have done such fun work. And I know that you put passion into that, but we often know that when you're running an agency, there's like these really cool, profitable, and passionate projects. And then there are some that you're like, oh, this is just pure passion. And maybe it won't help the bottom line. How are you also like checking into your intuition and also having a plan as a business owner of taking on, okay, like we need to make more sales for these brands that we really like, who can pay and who have a budget. And actually, Noah just said this, and now it's inspiring another short film. How are you balancing those two in your business right now?
That is a great question. And honestly, something I've had to work a lot at in the last year. So many things to unpack here. I think one, you'll see that as you become a parent, you really have to start to like filter really the bottom line versus the passion and like where all that fits in. And then and just to go back a little bit, I did have like one mentor told me, which I think hopefully would be insightful for your audience. He told me your artistry has gotten you to where you are, but your business mastery is going to take you for like where you want to go next. And that really has like stuck with me. And I think it's very often easy to like get very into the technical on the creative side of things, how to shoot great photos, how to light, all that stuff is like so important. But now being like a full-time business owner, the business side of things has become as much or equally important. And I think for me, some of that is like the creative technical I can almost kind of do with my eyes closed because I've put in like my 10,000 hours, so to speak, on that side. And so that is kind of this like transformation I've been trying to really work on this last year because it is really challenging, right? And saying yes to one job that like maybe I'm not passionate about, but I'm chasing the bottom line on it. And then another job comes up and this job now restricts me from taking on something maybe that I really want. So those are all different types of things I've been working on. And I have to give a shout out to my personal coach that I've been working with, Jomar Gomez, fellow Filipino down in LA. You guys should definitely check him out. The coaching experience has been like a lot different than I thought. And obviously it's like very business focused, but it also became very values focused. And one of the most like beneficial exercises that Jomar and I have done together is that we did kind of this deep dive interview and created, 9 to 11 values that are important to me. And from those values, I've been starting to filter new opportunities that come in, and decide if I want to take on something, regardless if it's like the bottom line or a passion project.
I love this. Also, we continually need mentors along the way, and we need people who are a little bit ahead of us. The same way you're doing here on the podcast, like, oh, these are things I wish I knew when I was early on in my journey. And people who have been in business a little longer also are so passionate about, oh, I wish business owners knew their values early on so they can make decisions early on. And that's what Jomar sounds like for you. And so I love hearing about this exercise. Like, listeners to the podcast know that we nerd out about brand values, personal values. Can you hit us up with some of those 9 to 11 values? Perhaps tell us like a story of why they mean so much to you, or maybe how you've already applied them to saying yes or no to certain jobs.
Yes, I have them here. I'll give you, not all of them, but I'll give you a couple. So really, like for me, and this has kind of been my word for 2025, which is alignment. And I feel like it's a broad word, but also like very specific. So I love starting there. So like, is this project, is this opportunity aligned either with who I am, where I want to go? And then that can kind of help filter kind of that next step of decision. And I would say, for example, I had one of my good friends, Madeline Down, who is an up and coming director. She did her short film earlier this month, and I was the assistant director for her. Now, as most of you people know, indie filmmaking is not the highest paying of jobs, but it is like very passion related. I really related to the story, and it was like 3 full days to pull back to it. Like, it was very aligned with what I want to do, which is breaking into TV and film. So that's just like more experience. The story itself really aligned with the type of stories that I want to tell. And then the type of people involved from like a crew standpoint were the type of people that I want to get to know and be involved with. So like alignment, all the way around, that's one of the key values for me in 2025.
I like this word for you so much. And this is such a good example because we do have, if you all want to tune into earlier podcast episodes, some of our foundational episodes coach you of how to find your values. Like, a sounds like a very similar exercise that you did with Jomar, but then you might have this list, but then what do you do with it? And Daniel gave you a really practical application of, hey, there's this one word, but I filtered it to saying yes to this job, but also, hey, is it aligned with a vision for my life? Is it aligned with the people I want to be associated with? And there were so many ways that you use that value as a filter of how to say yes, which I think is such a big deal because a lot of folks, I feel like we're often at crossroads. And as you use your value muscle more and more, as you get used to, okay, these are my handful of values, it seems to get easier and easier of what you say yes to and what you say to no to. And I will say that not that it'll be perfect. I feel like there are a few things even that come my way that I'm like, oh shoot, I shouldn't have said yes to that. That didn't feel right. And sometimes you learn by experience that maybe that's why that didn't feel good, is because it wasn't in line with your values. But it does get easier over time. And I feel like you shared such a practical example of that. Do you ever feel like you wear so many hats as a small business owner? I totally get that. Here at Come Plum, we want to keep you in your zone of genius, how you serve and show up for people. So leave the branding to us. In a collaborative way through brand coaching, we help you define your brand foundations, your brand strategy, and your brand expression, all that fun stuff like logo, websites, videos, photos, and more. If you go to comeplum.com and mention in the contact form that you heard about us through our Branding Your Business podcast, you get cool perks like an extra hour of coaching or maybe even 10% off your coaching package. We can't wait to collaborate with you to build a brand that you and your clients love. I know that you talked a little bit about these short films and these like stories that you are helping tell, right? With whether it's your own stories or friend stories, and that you just connected with them. And storytelling is such a big job for creators. Storytelling is a big part of the human experience, though, too. If we like kind of roll it back to Creatives 101 or Storytelling 101, how do you know, Daniel, like, this is a story that I align with, or this is a great story, or even when you're writing your own stories, again, you had your antennas up for the last flight of like something your son said, and that crazy thing that was happening where all the flights were down that were all aligned. Like, what makes a good story, either for us business owners who are just even like writing the here's my story on my website, they're trying to figure out what to put there, or they're trying to make a whole film or write a book. Do you have principles of what makes a good story?
That's a good question. I would say for me, a lot of it is like intuition. And if I'm hearing something, what kind of like makes my ears perk up or sit forward in my seat a little bit. And for instance, I watched the movie Conclave recently. I don't know if you've seen it, but I just thought it was really interesting. So basically, really quick, the Pope passes away, and it's like all kind of the behind the scenes of how they go about picking the next pope. So you have like this political thriller mixed with like the moral complexity of faith, of like trusting God. Is it right to want to have this type of power? So that was one of those, just kind of like a recent moment where I'm like, ooh, I'm into this. I'm leaning into this. It might not be for everyone, but I am connecting with this. And I think that's what kind of want to bring it back to. Is it something that I connect with? And I believe that for me, my connection with story has just been acquired taste over time between, reading, movies, podcasts. I do consume a lot to kind of like refine my palate.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing from you, storytelling is like somewhat intuitive because it's based on who you are as a person. Something that will resonate with me might not necessarily resonate with you. And at the same time, it's something that is a muscle and can be worked on. The more you get exposed to good stories, you're like, oh wait, I'm starting to find I like this kind of dialogue, or I like this style of storytelling. What are you refining that? Like, for those of us who are just like film noobs, I'm gonna be honest with you. I used to be like on top of the films that are coming out, but I am watching movies these days that I kind of just want to check out a little bit. We were going through a Channing Tatum kick not too long ago. Because, okay, 21 Jump Street is just like a fun movie, It's just something fun. And like, I know there's space for that too. But for those of us who are like not like film nerds right now, like, how can we start getting our palettes more in tune to like, oh, that's good storytelling? Are you looking at different lists? Are you diving on like IMDb? Are you following everyone at Sundance? Like, oh, what is your professional opinion or prescription for helping us with our film palettes?
Yes. Few things. One, mine has also shifted. I think being a parent, one, just being tired, and also like just heavier content is just, it's a little harder to take in, be it being a parent, if I'm being honest. So I've been very much looking to just kind of like chill out when I watch them. So I totally resonate with that. I would say then storytelling for me, it really just comes down to the basics, right? So it's like hero's journey. Is it easy to identify? Because I think it can get fit into a whole host of things, from a narrative film to a brand film to nonprofit. But like, is there a clear hero here? And the hero's not perfect, but then is there a guide that comes in and takes them on this journey of transformation from A to B? And then does it end, typically like comedy or tragedy is how it's played out, typically from like a literature standpoint. But is there some resolution and transformation that happens along the way? And I think that for me, if those like points are easy to identify, say for instance, in a brand film, I get excited to tell that story because it's very clear on what the story is. And something that I've been refining for myself is that process of deeper diving into discovery, because it's always there. I would say from a client standpoint, maybe they're always not the best at articulating. So it does come down to asking like a lot of questions. But I really think trying to go with that basic 3-act structure is like, you have this hero, some sort of inciting incident happens. They go on this journey, a guide comes in, and then there is a major resolution at the end.
Yeah, that is so good. And I like that you're already mentoring the other creatives who are listening in, or mentoring like the business owners who are like, hey, if you're going to write your bio, there has to be, even from first person, what was the conflict that made you say yes to starting this business? Who were the people or the instances that guided you to get there? And the boom, usually the resolution is, and that's why I started the Frame by Frame podcast, right? Or when I'm hearing you say too, oftentimes people are like, hey, I run a nonprofit. Can you help us tell our story? But it's like interviewing them to figure out what the conflict, the resolution, the guide is. And I think that is such a good framework. Okay, so for those watching the video version of this podcast, you can see my brother repping some like HBS right now. Do you want to give a shout out to some of the experience and things you learned at your time at Harvard? And that way gives a little bit more context while you're wearing your comfy
Yes,
looking
I'm
sweater.
pulling a Michael Scott. I'm wearing my business school sweatshirt on the business podcast. But yes, I got to take a 4-day course called the Business of Entertainment, Media, and Sports at HBS. I took it in the winter of two, which was just an incredible experience. You're on campus for 4 days with Professor Anita Alberse, who's just incredible when it comes to branding and breaking down athletes, celebrity, big brands, their decisions. And so we get like 10 real life case studies that she's done. One was with Beyonce. Shout out to Beyonce, who I know you're a fellow Beyonce lover. But then we also have interesting conversations around like who's going to win the streaming wars, Netflix or Disney Plus. It has all this data and info on it. And then also there was a case study on PSG and if they could become more of like their legend soccer franchise in Europe. So there's all there's a vast array of like conversations and case studies. And for me, one, it was cool. You literally have people from all over the world, really at the top of the game in this course, but really everyone's expected to participate. And so she can call on you randomly. So one, you have to make sure you read the case studies, but then two, it was cool that either insights I had or shared, they all resonated with different people. And it's like, okay, I can play on this level. And I would say like the biggest takeaway for that, and her book is really great. You should check it out. It's called Blockbuster, but her kind of whole theory is that big moves, big splashes is like where to put your energy and effort, right? So like Disney, for example, and I know this is like a hot button topic, but from a business perspective, it's smart. Like they're banking on movies trying to make $1 billion. They're going for the home run. So that's been an interesting filter to look through. And when I look back on like bigger jobs that I've done, those ones have really moved the needle and made a big difference in the bottom line. So, being a small business owner, it's tough to always find the home run or the grand slam, but I really would encourage people to push for that because in my opinion it has made a difference for me.
That's really good. And I like the idea of like, what is that blockbuster in your business? What is that thing that's really going to make a big splash? If you dedicate so much heart and energy and resources into a project, make sure it's a project that'll make that splash. I know in business, another big thing is also who you know, which oftentimes people go to business school to make those connections and to network. And you have such an interesting view on networking and how it's helped build your career. Can you tell us a few insights of how you view networking and what has worked for you as a business owner?
Yeah, to be honest, like it's so cliche, but like networking is everything and your worth is only as high as your network, in my opinion, in the creative field for sure. Just between conversations, doors that open up, different things like that. For me, this is like a little tidbit I'll give. Photography, taking people's photos has been one of like the best networking tools that I have learn to use. And really, that's not the intent that I started out with. I don't know about you, but like I've given out business cards. The like rate of return, staying in touch has been pretty slim. But like, hey, do you want a quick photo with this celebrity or this person? Like, I've been able to just stay in touch with people that way because you have their email, you're doing something kind and generous for them. And it's just been like a great way to stay in touch. So for all you photographers out there, being like very cool and casual about taking people's photos has been a great networking tool.
And that's so good because I can see that. I will agree. I feel like photography has opened up so many doors for me, just because it's a constant need in our world and taking people's headshots to get to meet you in person. You help create a memory with them and you're able to serve them at the same time. And so for those listening, maybe who aren't photographers are like, wait, is Daniel telling me I should become a photographer and take headshots? No. But what is that thing that is like headshots to you? That's an easy lift on your end, but it creates something memorable and it serves people so that you come to mind when this opportunity comes up. I think that's so good. Hearing a little bit about your career journey of how you've been in business like for 10 years on this creative journey and creating these things for other people, being a storyteller in that way. If you go back, I know you've had a camera in your hand since like you were a kid. How has your imagination of what your story would be like and the reality of what your story has been over the past decade, 2 decades? How have those compared to each other?
Great question. And what I've been honestly reconciling now in this new season of being a parent, I think there's just so much reflection and time to think about. To be honest, it does get hard in the world of social media and see people progressing or just getting different opportunities that maybe doors you've been knocking on haven't quite been open, that can get frustrating in this industry. But to your point, like when I pause and look back, I don't think I could have ever dreamed of the experiences that I've gotten to have, starting with a kid as a camera. Cause originally I just was gonna like go work at the Golf Channel. That's just all I thought like you could do growing up in Orlando. And then this whole journey I've been on is pretty wild. And so it's a practice for me to look back with gratitude, is something that I'm constantly working on and be thankful for those experiences. But I am someone where like the engine's always running and I want to like keep going even farther too. So it's definitely a balance.
Yeah, balance of gratitude and ambition, which imagine there's probably a mix or some synonyms of those on your values list, which makes me really happy.
I'll share a few more because I think it is helpful for other people. I think sharing your story and the honesty. So one, I would say, kind of with that balance, is faith and action. And I know like faith for us is super important, but I think faith in the action for me is like living out my beliefs and my values. And one of the highlights I have here is like taking bold risk in the face of uncertainty, which I have done in the past, but I think that's something honestly now as a parent is like it's just a different lens and perspective on things because there's more at stake, which is great. And then the other I would say is, and I think it's like really important for all entrepreneurs, is this term resilience. It's something my wife Lainey and I have talked a lot about, is that like we want to be, one, resilient as a family, but then two, just like as a business owner, the definition I have is the ability to show up in the face of adversity, setbacks, or challenges, which I think as a small business owner, as a filmmaker, as a creative, those things are always in play. And what I'm also encouraged about, there's so many people I look up to. John Chu probably being the number one right now, who's the director of Wicked, Asian American from the Bay. But all these different interviews, people I listen to at that level of like where I want to go, everything is faced with adversity, challenges, and how they overcame it. Most of the interviews I listen to, it's not rainbows and butterflies along the way.
Resilience is so good. Like it's a necessary thing, yeah, for entrepreneurs, for humans in this life journey, because there are so many things that knock us down, but it's the ability to just be like, okay, that was hard, acknowledge it. And then how do we keep on going through that? This is such a good segue for how we end our podcast. So many of you know I have these cards. If you are looking for ways to discover your values, again, shout out to Jomar Gomez, shout out to
Yes.
earlier episodes on the Branding Your Business podcast. But these cards are so cool, and we've been using them as a game to help us see what resonates with us. If I pull out a few, if there's a brand that comes to mind, you're like, oh my gosh, this brand
Mm.
or this person, like when I say the word resilient, I think of John Chu, right? And so we're going to pull more. I don't know what's in these cards. You're going to tell me to stop, and you are just going to tell me what brand goes with this word. So tell me when.
Okay. Ready.
Okay. Oh my gosh, who exudes a playfulness to you?
Playfulness. That's a good one. Probably one of my very OG early heroes in the business, Jimmy Fallon. I don't think there's anyone probably more in the entertainment business who's more playful and silly than him.
Oh my gosh, have you watched Songversations with him and Justin Timberlake?
Yeah, I've
where
seen everything with him and JT, of course.
sing this line like new shirt alert, like all day, every day. So that is a good one. Okay, let me pick two more. What about self-expression?
That one's pretty tough. Nike, and I would say in the sense of like that is probably a newer value in my opinion for Nike brand. I think, growing up as a Nike, there definitely was like a certain look of Nike, which is still the same, but I do feel like they've really kind of opened up their brand to be more self-expressive than they had been traditionally.
Yeah, I do feel like even with their ambassadors, they're using more creative freedom to help those ambassadors express it. That's so good. Okay, last one. Gonna pick one. Okay, so it's time.
Time. That is a really good one I've been thinking about a lot lately. As a parent, I don't think I've ever experienced time uh, as I have before. It's just like the day just flies by, which has not always been the case at different jobs or whatnot. Who I think gives a certain interpretation of time is the director Christopher Nolan. All of his movies revolve around time, from Tenet to really my favorite right now is Interstellar. And there's just so many different scenes that he talks about time in reference to being a parent that I never really understood before watching the movie. But, even for instance, like the heartbreaking scene when he realized like how much time has passed that he spends on Miller's planet and like basically misses his kids growing up, like that scene before is like very emotional, but that literally like cuts to my core being a parent now and like not wanting to miss a moment. So I think in my opinion Christopher Nolan is a master of time.
That is so good. Such a good answer, Daniel. People are gonna want to nerd out on your work and all you do. How can folks find you online? Can you tell them about your social media? Can you also like tell them so that they can really believe when I say I'm like 2 degrees of separation from Sierra? They like have proof. So how can they find you online?
Yes, yes. Russ and Sierra, we've spent a lot of time together. They're fantastic. You can find me Daniel J Mogg on Instagram is really where I post my work. And as Praise said, the Frame by Frame podcast, which I'm excited to have you on to chat. So you'll have to check out her episode as well. And we'll flip the tables on her. And then danielmogg.com is my website right now, but I feel like I need some personal branding help. So we might have to have a conversation about that.
Songversation. We'll have one.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for like being so vulnerable and generous with your story and where you are right now. I know that a lot of our listeners will benefit from it. So thank you for being on the Branding Your Business podcast.
Thank you so much. Can't wait. I'll come back again soon.